Good afternoon, all. And thank you for staying this long. And of course, thanks ever so much for the wonderful panel that we have this evening. So, you guys already know perhaps about me, what I do. But I think today is more about the governance and about the blockchain technology and its adoption, which is the most important factor. So before we go and start diving into that particular subject, let's start with the introduction. And please, Plamen, on to you. Explain a little bit about yourself briefly, your history, and then how you are one of the most vital and important person for this evening.
Oh, I like that selfishness very much. Hello, Berlin. How are you? Hey. I know from the morning that you're not very active. Obviously, the afternoon doesn't help much. Hello, Berlin. Thank you very much for having me here. Amazing show. I love it. And few words about me. Started many years ago in everything digital and technology. Exited a number of companies. For 10 years, I'm executive chair of the Webit.Foundation, where we commit on developing the ecosystems, couple of million euro grants for startups, and developing hopefully new unicorns for everything eastern of Berlin and Vienna, ending up to India and Singapore. As investor, I invest in impact investments that can change world. My PhD is in telemedicine, and I work a lot also in the AI area. I'm here to talk about blockchain governance, because what I believe and what I will be stating during the next 45 minutes is that everything that technology has built so far is not anything more than what we have already paid with one currency, our privacy. And for me, blockchain and the emanation of blockchain as technology, which will come hopefully because the protocol itself has a lot of bottlenecks, is the freedom that we are all looking for. I don't want my kids, I don't want my family, my friends, my ecosystems around the world. Webit stands for over 100,000 people, community and digerati around the world. I don't want them to be prisoners of their own private data. And furthermore, of course, blockchain for all of us, I'm sure you agree with that, stands for trust. Do you think so? All right, so that's what we were going to be talking about, and I'm sure that with a lot of you we will agree, but hopefully we will reach to where we can further discuss with policymakers. And I've recently joined the 30 people group on EU Blockchain Observatory Forum as part of the European Commission with the European Parliament endorsement. So we're looking for best cases around Europe and the world. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Please, over to you, sir.
Oh. Well, my name is Jedlicka. I started a new country 3 years ago between Croatia and Serbia. It was a fairly successful venture. Now we've got almost 500,000 people that are applying for citizenship of Liberland, some 65,000 businesses waiting in the line. We are also one of the ICO startup countries. We're kind of proud of that the blockchain community around Liberland is growing and that there is so much interest. We're working globally to get Liberland recognized. And it's not that hard because we are really non-problematic country. We were founded on no man's land in a way, and we are bringing freedom to the people. We are bringing the idea that we should live in a very little regulated society with very little taxes. Actually, we are going even further. We want to build a voluntary tax system which rewards the taxpayers. I think that is something which has been deeply missing in the societies where we are living and usually paying 50–60% tax, and nobody even says thank you for paying these taxes. And we are also rethinking the ways that the government should work, for example, in terms of justice. So we are building a first decentralized system of justice for our citizens and e-residents. And we're also working on some smart solutions, and I hope that will be, by coincidence, our advisor Oleksii is with us on the panel. So we are also working on some smart ways how to register property in Liberland, and our great advantage is that we are starting from scratch. We don't have any legacy systems. we can implement these. And of course, we are bringing them to other countries as well. So the first country recognized Liberland was Somaliland. We hope to speed them up in their development and bring all the coolest stuff from the blockchain world into the reality.
Well, I think we'll have a lot more to talk about ICO startup country because I'm going to pin you on that one in a minute. Oleksii, you are on the spot since you are the advisor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love this stage. I love Berlin. And I'm a researcher of blockchain technologies, electronic governance, and electronic democracy at the University of Bologna in Italy. And also an advisor of a couple of interesting projects, like with Liberland, with a team of Emercoin on electronic governance as well. And I'm developing now a couple of interesting projects, like tokenization of real estate and cadastral registry for real estate. It's a completely new idea, more systematic, in order to address a lot of legal issues. Actually, this is my background. I'm a lawyer. Yeah. And so I came up with the idea to design a completely new approach for treating some legal issues like inheritance, like ownership, marital property, and some other things that it's not addressed now when we're using just tokens or cryptocurrency and some other stuff. And I really hope that governments will be to put on the agenda of governments all these projects related to the implementation of blockchain in governance. For example, notarization, but without notaries, and some other things that eliminates necessity of middlemen.
Thank you. Alex, I think you and we have one thing in common, which is the investment banking background for sure. So why don't we start from there?
Thanks very much for that. My name is Grebnev. I am CEO and co-founder of Oxygen, a decentralized CryptoRepo platform. My background is 15 years of investment banking at Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch. The last couple of years I've been focused on building my own businesses. Oxygen, what we do, we help people make more with their cryptocurrencies. A, can generate more yield. B, raise liquidity against the crypto assets. And 3, borrow crypto assets to go short. There is a big gap right now between what one can do with a share, with a financial asset, and what one can do with a crypto asset, and we're looking to bridge that gap. Where it becomes relevant as well is partly to do with a tokenization of real assets, be it kind of real estate or be it indeed financial assets, where the crypto-to-crypto infrastructure can be a model for how real assets can operate in a much more frictionless way. And we're one of the first companies that is getting regulated under the new DLT regime in Gibraltar. So we have some kind of interesting thoughts to share, how governments are working with companies to cooperate. So there's a lot of value that regulation can add to the process, and government involvement can add to the process in terms of resilience, setting standards on client expectations, and also in terms of bringing the whole kind of crypto mainstream. And I think there are different opinions, but I'm of the opinion that there are certain things where government can play a very positive role in terms of developing the crypto ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. Before we get into nitty-gritty things, can all of you who believe that the blockchain technology should become the mainstream and the government should provide the full support, how many people support that agenda? We have a tough job. Not many people would do.
Oh, wait a minute. How many of you heard what he said? The same number, you see? So if more people hear you, they will raise their hands.
Okay. On the 6th of June, as you are part of one of the groups, I'll be speaking at the European Parliament, speaking about the government and the adoption of the blockchain technology. Now, we know how important CBDC is, right? Just to inform, like, that's central bank digital currencies. We know central banks have been called as an unreliable boyfriend, such as Mark Carney, because of his U-turns coming back and forth. Where do you think, first of all, that acceptance of a digital currency by the central bank is going to happen the first? As I'll start with you, Alex, because Goldman Sachs has made the most amount of a noise in this space in putting the desk out there.
Right, in terms of, so could you repeat the question, please?
So do you think that the central government's going to have a CBDC, like the central currency, very soon, or are we just going to see quite a few number of years before central banks would ever evolve to this?
I think probably the latter. I think if you take any blockchain pilot projects or anything in terms of adoption, I think it takes years. It takes corporate years, and corporates are much smaller.
Yeah.
So I think as far as governments are concerned and having a real impact at how we live, I think that's going to take a lot longer.
What about you?
Well, our representative on Barbados was actually the man that helped to implement this first currency. Barbados Central Bank actually issued a digital cryptocurrency. And we see that it's happening. Marshall Islands now has done it as well. It's a trend. It's, of course, big win for the first movers. And even the central banks in America and Europe understand that it's a way to go. They're trying to get on it. But honestly, we see that they can never get as good as private currencies. They can never beat Monero, and they cannot beat Monero in its, for example, privacy settings. So they will always play a second league in a cryptocurrencies, and it's inevitable. This technological revolution that we are seeing is something that will render national states and national institutions obsolete. And we are here, Liberlanders are here to help the countries to go through that process and speed it up, actually.
Well, let's face it. I mean, governments, they love blockchain and they don't crypto. So that's very simple, and there is a very simple.
Did you say governments love cryptos?
They don't love crypto. I didn't want to use the word love because it doesn't go well with what I was going to say. But yeah, they love blockchain because blockchain could be a solution, but crypto is not the thing that they want even to discuss.
Yeah.
So having that in mind, it doesn't mean that solutions are not there, but I agree with Alex that it will take a long time. What we at such events can do together, how many of you have ICOs here about to be launched in the next 3 months? None?
Not many.
Okay, very few. All right, so where we can start is, let's give some basic data. Europe was responsible for 32% of the global GDP production just 12 years ago.
Okay, no, but the question back is that if central banks are not going to adopt a currency, a digital currency, right, the adoption of the entire protocol of the blockchain is going to be in a jeopardy.
Well, there are no representative of any
governments, yes?
So let's not speak about that because I don't think that we can speak on their behalf. What I'm saying is we have to have the right rhetorics. So when we talk, like you and me will be again in the parliament speaking, when we talk about this, we have to say the right words in the right time. The right words are where I started. 12 years ago, Europe was responsible for 32% of the global GDP production. 12 years later, Europe is responsible for less than 21% of the global GDP production. This means 1/3 of the power of Europe has vanished only for 12 years. With that speed, we are getting into a third world continent in a speed of light. It's nothing, it's 12 years. So the question is crypto and blockchain a driver for the future of Europe? If yes, here in this room, I can say we have a future. And then we start elaborating with the policymakers how this could happen in a way that it's feasible, not in 100 years, not in 20 years, because 20 years will be too late. And obviously, blockchain protocol will evolve, hopefully, into a more secure state. but actually starting now and leading that process. That's why I joined the EU Observatory Forum, and that's why I'm there. So is it going to happen now? No. No, because if you ask any financial minister around Europe what they think about crypto, from the European Union, I mean, you will hear one and the same answer, if you hear an answer at all.
Actually, that's wrong, because I sat myself with the finance minister of Lithuania, and he's welcoming the idea of a blockchain, and he's saying that we are putting red carpets, and I put it on the story on the Forbes, that we're rolling out the red carpets for the companies to come and make disruption here.
The question is that one of scale, right? So I think how many people live in Europe?
Yeah.
How many people live in Lithuania? So it's great that someone is starting that, but can you see it happening in the UK in the next 3 years?
Absolutely, because that's why we just continuously be playing this game of revolving door and an unreliable boyfriend, because Marcani said back in February that, okay, cryptocurrencies are still pretty much the part of a scam, and now he says that, look, I think the CBDC could become a reality because we are working towards various different technologies. But let's move on to the next subject, which is where your project Oxygen is coming, right? Because you are taking very important step in relation to some sort of a fixed income product, but not a fixed income product. But you need a regulator behind it. You need a jurisdiction behind it. Hence, you've chosen Gibraltar. And I applaud the work that Gibraltar is doing, despite the fact that Lithuania is on the verge of doing an STO, so your security tokens. So why did you go to Gibraltar, or how you think that is going to help you as opposed to other jurisdictions?
Look, we had a regulatory consultant which helped us choose which country to go to, and it's a consultant who advised different governments around the world, including Japan, Luxembourg, some guys in the States. And I think so the reason why I picked Gibraltar is for 3 reasons. So one is principles-based approach. So rather than prescribed rules, they look at things as with understanding that no one blockchain-based business is the same. So that's one. Second, it's the speed, right? So I think if you look at someone like Bitstamp, I think they were getting some kind of licensing for up to 2 years. Yep. Gibraltar commits to getting things done in 3 months. Now, we're towards the end of the process, as 2.5 months in, having had a kind of 4-hour meeting with the regulator last week. So we'll see what happens in the next 2. Now, met with the Minister of Finance there, who is very committed to keeping to the timeline. That's very important. And 3 is how much thought has gone into the regulation, and to what extent the government has worked when thinking of different laws, to what extent it's worked with the banking system. I think what happened before with the Isle of Man is where they welcomed, they created great laws, very favorable laws towards crypto-related businesses, and then the banking, one of the main banks, switched off their accounts for 20-odd companies in one day, right? So the key thing is what they've done, what the Gibraltar guys have done, is have kept the banks on board from the very earlier on and built out procedures in terms of how to look and manage risk of financial crime, which of course a lot of institutional people are, well, actually all of us, I'm not comfortable with. And so to me, this is the reason for Gibraltar. Now, as far as the regulation overall, I think what the regulation does do, it helps set a certain standard to give clients comfort and some kind of recourse to someone else. So you're responsible not just someone to go to if things go wrong. 3, it's implementation of best practices of the financial world, because the DLT is a financial regulation. So things like security of client assets. So what's happening to your assets when you deposit them on the exchange? Are they being used? What happens? What happens then? So kind of it increases overall resilience, I would say, of the business. It makes you think about a lot more things than you necessarily would have.
I would actually connect this question with the one that was previously there. Okay, there are some regulations which are healthy, and there is a good reason, but why Europe is lagging behind. And the European Commission itself estimates that the 200,000 pages of regulations that were produced in EU are actually slowing economic progress by 3.5% a year. That's actually exactly the number that you mentioned, that 1/3 of the output has been thrown out of the window. It's actually like the regulations that are implemented in Europe are killing half of the continent every 20 years. If it's virtually the same thing to implement this package of regulations, which are usually done for big business, and to, of course, benefit somebody.
So should they, as a government regulator, should they just give you a free hand? If they give a free hand, we know what the SEC has already said. They said that, look, if you wanted to see any unregulated market, go and see the ICO market. I completely concur what you are saying. Regulations would kill them. And then, yes, it is easy to blame the EU that too many regulations. But we know the financial crisis, what happened during the financial crisis.
Well, of course, there are many different reasons for the financial crisis, and one of them was, of course, the regulation of mortgage market in the United States, because everybody was supposed to get mortgage no matter how wealthy they were. That was a good governmental policy to protect everybody, which almost ruined the world economy at the end. But so I'm not a big fan of regulations. I know they don't work. In the US, there is a great other example. For example, they just calculated not too long ago that if they stop the regulations on 1990s level, and they just wouldn't come up with the new ones, they would actually create the economy the size of Germany. And because they implemented all these regulations, they virtually dump a bomb on Germany, which would be on their territory, and it's not there anymore. So I think there are some regulations which are needed. In Liberland, we actually have implemented some 20 pages of laws, and I think we're quite fine with it for now. And if you are committing, and this is something that is also happening, people are issuing fake ICOs and scams out of Liberland, a part of regular things. And these people are hunted, luckily, by one of the best hackers, white hat hackers on the planet, and we will find them and we will prosecute them in Liberland jurisdiction. And we actually have a, thank you. And this is what we actually want to do, and our justice system would be like to be open to others. So the things that, you cannot actually go anywhere to really prosecute somebody for these scam ICOs, we could probably prosecute them even outside of our jurisdiction, which could be interesting use case for our justice system. This is something that we are exploring, but it's a big problem. But again, we don't need extensive regulations about ICOs. We just need to be able to prosecute the scams.
I think
sorry. Go ahead. No.
Just to echo on that, I think the regulation is a very general word, right? And should we regulate ICOs, not regulate ICOs? I think there's a lot more to kind of crypto world than ICOs, right? So when you think about blockchain and kind of crypto, the whole of crypto ecosystem, if you want to convince, I think the upside is in getting the kind of mainstream getting hooked on crypto, right? So that's because we are here, and the real world is kind of the more real world is here. And I think to do that, I think people need to feel comfortable, right? And I think if you think about, for example, any fund managers who are managing third-party money. So one is to put in your money somewhere, right? Another one is putting someone else's. And what does it take Fidelity with kind of 2.4 trillion to put their money into somewhere? What kind of due diligence care must they do? Now, it's never going to happen without regulation as far as kind of that is concerned. So,
would it be okay? Please.
Just let me play a little bit of devil's advocate. Otherwise, it will be boring. No. Let's face it. I'm sure that all of you travel all around the world, and you know why you live in Europe, or why you live in Singapore, or why you live anywhere, and this is everybody's choice. At the end of the day, the choice of where you live comes with the security that you have. And security, unfortunately, comes with law and regulations. Otherwise, it would be a great free place to live. But then you don't know what the next person next to you is doing. So regulation is not bad when it's the right regulation. That's what I'm saying for sure. I don't say that there should be a lot of regulation, but I would call it governance. And when we, as an ecosystem, are able to show that governance and self-governance is in our hands, meaning that at the end of the day, you don't want to buy things from somebody who is doing money laundering because you're helping his bad business grow bigger. And we know what money laundering stands for, and for sure, I'm not happy to support such businesses that go after things that I don't want to support. So that's where I believe governance is 100% needed, and that's where crypto needs to stand for, making sure that all the KYC goes further way beyond, and making sure immediate transactions, but with a clear transactional, being able to trace where the money comes from, for sure. So that would open the whole crypto market. That's the biggest challenge that we have now. Everything else, the business and the ecosystem will build on the top. And let me say why I believe it's important to empower governments doing that. Let's go back like a couple of 100 years, and we see that democracy is a very simple method where people believe they are running their countries, they're voting for the countries, and they're doing what they're doing. On the other hand is the totalitarian regimes that actually are doing whatever they want. So what was the difference? Let's say 60 years ago, 70 years ago, the totalitarian regimes were lacking the computing power, the data processing power. That's what made democracies so strong. That's what made democracies working together, using more data, and winning wars and doing stuff, etc., growing bigger and bigger. Now, what made democracy strong makes them weak. That's what actually innovation stands for, being able to adapt. With the computing power so strong, actually the totalitarian regimes are able to prosecute and execute data processing at phenomenal large scales, which makes totalitarian regimes very strong. So that's where the hope of blockchain is. That's where our ecosystem can actually talk to governance and tell them, guys, if you want to see further democracies flourishing, you have to be decentralized. You have to use the power of the decentralized computing system to actually empower the future of democracy. And I know, again, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm talking a little bit politics, but it needs politics if we want to have our ecosystem helping build the future, helping build a better decentralized future. We're talking governance here, not only crypto. Crypto is one of the most substantial part of it, because at the old times, if I'm a king and I want to go for a war, what do? I need gold. How do I get it? I have to convince the people with gold to give me the gold so I can go for war. What do I do now if I want to go for war? I just print money. A little bit of different, like it's easier now, somehow.
Okay. Oleksii, over to you. I think the message here is governance. That's the most important aspect.
All right.
And this is where you play an important role, right?
Yeah. So you begin with the issue related to legitimization of cryptocurrency, and we cannot put a blockchain and crypto in different sides, in different corners. Step number 0 is complete legitimization of cryptocurrency. And then we can talk about projects related to electronic voting on the blockchain, public registries on blockchain, tokenization of real estate, notarization, and everything, which is run on blockchain. And we cannot use, actually, if we don't use crypto, there is no public blockchain. Right? So the only alternative is to use a permission blockchains, but they are centralized. If we want decentralization, we need public blockchain and cryptocurrency.
If anything is centralized, then forget about a blockchain technology, right? Because we don't want to do it.
So this is step number 0. The step number 1 is we don't need actually to change regulation, to reform regulation. My idea is to introduce alternatives. Just imagine, can you manage your title rights, for example, on your house, online on the blockchain? No, you're not. you have to deal with notaries, with registrars, with brokers, with everything. And the only way to go forward is to allow people to choose, to legitimize it. If I want to use conventional, traditional legal tools, or to transfer my title on the blockchain and transact online, peer-to-peer, without a middleman, just using smart contracts and work it smoothly. Yeah.
I would just like to add, there is one interesting example of the regulations being completely contradictory to the real world and to the necessities of like adopting blockchain. For example, GDPR and blockchain. How many people thought about that combination, right? Yeah. Blockchain is about transparency, the fact that the history is not forgotten, the fact that everything is clear, and GDPR is about making everything fuzzy and then try to forget what has happened. And it's in complete contradiction. Like you would have to basically ban all the blockchains in order to be GDPR compliant. And this is the crazy world we are living in, where the regulations are going against the development of the humanity, basically.
But so is that not just defeating the purpose then, because it's making the jobs for regulators and the governance and the adoption of everything even more difficult with the GDPR and then now blockchain in contradiction with each other? What about Alex?
There are a lot of regulations, and they do overlap and can contradict. However, I don't think then the conclusion out of that is to say, let's forget about all the regulation. So to me,
I think that one of the strongest signal in the industry came from Goldman Sachs the day that they announced that here is our desk, and now a number of other banks started to do it. That itself ensures that, you know, if the big Wall Street giants are going to adopt it, government's going to throw their weight behind it.
You see, in such a fast pace of changing world, you can't blame regulators for trying to catch up with it. And let's not forget, majority of regulators are very analog people. Let's face it, I mean, that's the reality. And because of the fast pace of changes that we experience, you can't expect miracles. That's why I'm trying to establish a wording convention that actually builds up on, I mean, again, these events are very important because are there any representatives of regulatory here in the room? Any?
I think you are free to speak as you like.
No, it's not about free or not free. Actually, it's better to involve in a dialogue because that's what really matters. I was invited at a place very high in the mountains in Switzerland at another event to speak about empowering women in politics and business, and I was the only man there. So we don't need to be in that place where only blockchain people and nobody else, and what do we talk to each other? We know each other.
Again, it boils down to the education aspect, right? Because we need to educate the central banks, and I've been saying this over and over, and the regulators.
Yeah, I'm trying not to be controversial. I can be very controversial, can go very, very much beyond and what the blockchain governance should look like. What I'm trying to do is to build a step-by-step approach so we can really, as you mentioned rightfully, educate the regulators on what and where should be done. So GDPR. GDPR reminds me of very good intentions, which we all have. I started with this. We have to protect our children from being prisoners of their future. That's where blockchain stands for.
Exactly.
So there is no controversy here. We just need to find a way to synergize it and to present it in a way, because GDPR is now, but it's not forever. It could be improved, it could be directed. It's just very good intention to protect the Europeans in this case and their private personal data. I'm talking about the intentions. Well, maybe there are many other intentions in the back, which we don't need to share now on the stage.
Public. You have to incentivize the public if they're using the data. Oleksii, you have something else to say.
Yeah, right. I do really support your idea about education of politicians, of statesmen, of knowing better technologies, blockchain especially. But there is another thing that really, really is not good because of hype of irresponsible politicians. Is that they just want quick wins. You know, they say, okay, let's implement blockchain. But when you look inside in this project, there is nothing to do with the blockchain. There is no really good, mature solutions. So we have to, you know, on the one side, educate them. On the another side, the community, the blockchain community must be mature and to propose politicians very good projects.
Oh, it really
just for hyping.
It's about self-governance here, exactly. That's where we stand for. And by the way, all the industries in the world, every single industry in the world, at certain point, goes there at self-regulation and starts building real bodies that really work for the sake of the industry and for the sake of society. That is the phase that we as community need to build. Yeah. Not just, you know, we go for go for the ads campaigns of the multi-billionaires raising up a couple of ICOs. No, go for a very clear and very confident building society based on transparency, based on real great future, decentralized future that empowers everybody, including the policymakers. And there must be a reason for the organizers to invite me here, because at the end of the day, actually in 1 month time, we bring together 1,500 policymakers. 1,500 policymakers in Sofia, and we will be talking about this. And I want to see everybody there. I want to see the same message sent to them, because they need to understand what we're talking about, right?
Gents, would it be okay that the word governance, self-governance, only emerged when Congress took a step back and let SEC and CFTC completely free hands, because they haven't said anything that, okay, how they should be. They just keep saying that, okay, there should be self-governance, and then different advisories, different consortiums, and everything else have started to come up. Do you not think like the day that SEC and CFTC put their foot down and then the Congress comes hard on them, the self-governance would be out of the door?
I really believe the best thing that they can do is just get out of the business, and the politicians can do the same. You know, they're always asking how we can help economy, who should we sponsor, who should get more subsidies, but really the best way how you can help economy is stop dealing with it. And we really need this new generation of thinking, just like we have separated the church and a state. We need to separate the economy and the state, and that's the future if we want to prosper.
Thank you.
All right, now, do you have stones? I will say something that maybe you will stone me. Guys, there are other people out there, humans, that are not entrepreneurial, that are not this, that are not that. And these people need rules. They need to survive. This is part of us. We are people, and we should support each other. And it's not just the wild, wild west, which we know it was. There were no rules, no regulations. You remember how people shot each other? Do we want to live in this society? I don't. I want my kids to live in a better life. Not worse, better. And better comes with rules. Only the rules can set us free. If we all follow the same rules, which are not rules for everything, but basic rules that guarantee our safety, our freedom, everything else is a rotten regulation, and it should not be there.
Never-ending debate, right? Because regulations, less regulations, or shouldn't be regulations.
There is a great example, right? You've got these qualified investors in the United States, and it's a crazy regulation. You have to be a millionaire. You have to have all other sort of preconditions, and they are what the regulator is doing, and it's one of those really enforced laws, is they're preventing poor people to get richer because they don't allow them to invest. And it's like a typical US regulation where they're making poor poorer and rich richer, and it doesn't really even have any meaningful sense to it, right? They're just preventing people from making money. But yet they say, we are protecting you from the evil hands of the market. Luckily, we've got all these technologies, and even the Americans can set up the VPN, and they can buy any token they want.
I cannot agree more than this. Well, at the same time, everybody can go Vegas and lose all their money, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, I agree. Of course, that kind of examples are absolutely true. So we have to just to find. But again, I'm trying to speak here on behalf of our ecosystems and to find the best way to talk, because at the end of the day, we cannot change everything from now till tomorrow. It's called revolution, and many people will die. But let's go for evolution and build a better world for all of us, step by step, but not in 100 years' time, but maybe in 5 to 10.
But this step-by-step is the issue. That's why people are choosing Gibraltar. That's why people are choosing other countries. Because which country is taking bigger step, or which country is getting closer to, that's creating their entire issue.
That's the best of freedom. Once we see Gibraltar exhaling, or Liechtenstein, which I'm meeting in 1 week time, the government, and Luxembourg, once the other countries see them excel, and not breaking any rule, and then we have a great example.
And you can scale it.
And do it. And then you scale it up. You always need these small laps where you see the future and then make this future. And then that's what we need to use.
Basically, you're putting the gun on someone else's shoulder. That's why you're doing it. And then just let it happen.
I think you're doing it
I wanted to give the opportunity to audience for the last 4 minutes. So if anyone has any questions.
No way. By the way, while the mic is going there, I just wanted to tell you all, guys, today I have a birthday, and I woke up with the thing, I wake up like for the past 30 years, with a thing that it's about two things, generosity and happiness. And because I don't complain, I'm happy, let's be generous. Whoever meets me after this and gives me his business card or her business card will get a present from me.
Great advertisement.
€1 worth of ticket.
Please, sir.
Yeah, we're talking about regulations. Before you were talking about ICO, of the scams, etc. I remember that there is, for example, a project that the name is CoinCrowd that aims in the token sort of protection for the token holders, that they can vote how and when to release the money to the development team. So this is a way to self-regulation of this world. And it was Vitalik itself to talk about this decentralized ICOs. And so we don't need your regulations. We don't need your protection, because we are self-aware and able to protect ourselves. In the development team of the Bitcoin Private, where I am, we are going to create a privacy coin where the privacy coins are to be censorship resistant. So we don't need regulation, because the censorship resistance is against any kind of regulation. It cannot be regulated by any government. And the future, what is the future? Is the decentralized application. So we will have Facebook without Zuckerberg, and Amazon without Amazon. We will have Uber without Uber, you understand? So what's the point? The point is that this is not a declaration of war. This is a declaration of independence. Independence from the rule, independence for the establishment, because the war is already won. This will happen this year. Not next, not in 5, not in 10 years.
If I may, what's your question? We agree with the regulation.
It's advertising.
What's the question, please? Because we got 2 minutes.
The question is, what this debate is for the regulation, if regulation are not necessary in this world. Regulation are just stopping the evolution.
Okay, Alex.
It's not about regulation. It's rethinking of what do we understand about regulation. Is it a paper written, or this is just a piece of code?
Very well said.
Law. And when, yeah, right. And in this way, we don't need regulation itself because code regulate our relations. And you correctly. And when you think about, for example, SEC, Security and Exchange Commission, they were created 90 years ago. And what do? They maintain the registry, central registry, who issued what. Why do we need that registry, centralized registry? Because the blockchain is a registry itself. Why do we need duplicate these records, who issued what?
I love the enthusiasm. One more question before we finish, sir. One more question from the audience.
Just let me say that Uber without Uber, Facebook without Zuckerberg, etc., reminds me of what the Lion King said, planet Earth without humans. You know, it goes well, but it's about governance, not regulation. That's what we are talking about. So
briefly, please.
Thank you, guys. I really like the discussion, how it goes. Absolutely enchanté of Liberland. But still, I want to ask you, we are still speaking the old-fashioned world. So why a lot of people from the community cannot understand your word? Because we're still speaking about the regulation. So if we're gonna name it another word, so if we're gonna name it some kind of new word that would be understood for everybody in the community, I think it's gonna be better. And the question is, are you still believe in governments? Are you still believe, you have talked a lot of that we have to educate these people who are putting the laws. They do not protect us. They cheated us a lot of time. We have a unique chance today to be more happier, to have new future for all humankind with no guys sitting on wherever. So do we still need the politicians in blockchain?
Okay, very briefly, sir, very briefly.
Of course, we are heading to the governmentless future, and we can already see that all these different elements which are going to be the size of nations are being built. Those are the decentralized autonomous organizations or decentralized autonomous governance models that we see, and we see that Dash is getting to a size of nation slowly but surely, and that we will see much more of these institutions happening, and on the other hand, we will see the fall of traditional nation states one by one. But I just wanted to say one more thing about the regulations. Like, people are obsessed with regulation and so on. But for example, Czech Republic also doesn't have any regulations about ICOs. The same way, like Liberland doesn't have any regulation about ICOs. And nobody cares. You know, nobody sees Czech Republic, and even the Czech Central Bank, because they've got a reasonable governor there, said, we are not going to make any regulations about crypto in the near future. So anybody can issue whatever they want.
Thank you.
You know, it's just, you know, really, those things are the state is a state of mind, and I think we are too much tied to the belief system that we were born to.
Thank you. I think, as we all kind of agreed, it's the education, working with the regulators, working within the frameworks of sandboxes, proving through the right projects that, look, regulators, blockchain has a bad name because of KYC and all others, but it has the ability to change the world. It will change the world. It will not look like the same as it is today, because the way that we are looking at, from your manufacturing to your supply, those are the real cases of the blockchain technology. I want you guys to put our hands together for our beautiful panel who have contributed today. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you. Great panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.